today is a very special day.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Christina Tarantola.
This is Dr. Adam Martin.
And we are the Fit Pharmacists.
What is the Fit Pharmacist? Is it a person? Not really. It's more so a movement, an idea that you can become the Fit Pharmacist, the best at your profession. Our belief is that if you are operating at 100%, you can give better care to your patients, children, family, everyone in your life that you interact with. Many professions, including pharmacy, involve some level of stress. I'm sure you can all relate to this. 13-hour shifts, no break, tech call-offs, the list goes on. We want to do our job to the best of our ability. However, what happens when we get stressed out? So stressed that we can't even stand it. We get sick, our immune system suppressed, cortisol skyrocket. This is where stress management comes in. So as you all know, pharmacy can be quite the stressful job. However, where focus goes, energy flows. So that's why we have today a special episode focusing on stress.
Exactly. So we have a special guest today on the show, and she's going to help us share some important tips on stress management, which I'm sure everybody could use, whether you're a pharmacist or not. So Kamala holds a PhD in counseling education and is a licensed professional counselor practicing for the last 10 years. She specializes in grief and loss, marital counseling, depression and anxiety, eating disorders, spiritual formation, life transition, and growing in personal awareness and wholeness. She loves research and teaching and the process of transformation. Fighting for joy and pursuing wisdom with the unique and complex people she meets in counseling is one of the things she enjoys most. She's also an avid reader, outdoorsy person, a mother of 4 amazing little people, God bless you, 4 kids, woo, and a wife of a pretty incredible fellow and lover of God. Wow. We are so grateful to have you on our podcast today, Kamala.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about stress management. What can we learn today?
Sure. Well, I think that I wanted to tell you a little bit about short-term tips and then maybe also talk about the long run. I think you had wanted to start off with not having time, and that's something you hear a lot. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of times everyone wants to do these things, but when it comes time to actually putting them in action, the number one, whether it's lifestyle, nutrition, just life improvement, the number one reason that we hear is, I don't have time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, let's talk about the short run. I guess if you don't have a lot of time and how much time you get to spend to get this under control, the question really is, it depends on how deeply you want to be different. If you just want some tips to manage a few pesky symptoms, I can tell you, or hundreds of self-help books and YouTube videos can show you how to deep breathe, to become mindful, to exercise, to meditate, etc. You can become good at managing physical and mental, emotional symptoms in the moment. For example, as you know, our bodies are amazing and can heal from physical symptoms of anxiety partly through our breath. When we get anxious, one of the first things we do is hold our breath. Automatically and often not consciously, we tense up and start taking shallow breaths. But through steady, deep breathing, you can begin to retrain your nervous system, which has power to heal itself from trauma and anxiety. So you can learn to get your breath control and under control in minutes. You can also spend a half-hour meditating or praying each morning. Meditating on true and beautiful things and begin your day fresh is a powerful way to deal with anxiety. Or you can spend 30 to 40 minutes exercising or working in the garden, which actually research shows that working in the dirt actually produces happiness chemically, since dirt has microbes that mimic a good antidepressant. It produces more serotonin in your brain. I thought that was just fascinating. Yeah. So if all you want is a quick fix, then some of these strategies and others that you can read online may alleviate some of your anxiety for a time. You could probably restructure your time so that you're managing anxiety symptoms in the couple of hours that you have before work or after work.
Yeah, I mean, the deep breathing thing, I know whenever I'm extremely stressed out or even, just getting excited about something and kind of trailing off into my own thought, I will start to have that shallow breathing. So I can really relate to what you're saying. So that was more of the short-term thing. So what about the long run? How do you manage it?
Yeah, great. Well, in the long run, quick fixes may not be sufficient. As you both know, as pharmacists, medication is often only part of the solution for health problems. The other aspects of the human person, the mental, social, and spiritual, must also be addressed. In the case of anxiety, many of the underlying causes are deep, complex issues that inherently take time to heal. Anxiety is related to our deeper fears and loves. These fears and loves form our habits of mind, our regular thought patterns, and also become stored in our bodies. Our bodies actually become storehouses of stress. This wear and tear on the body has been linked to immune system problems, cardiovascular problems, urinary and digestive problems, and many more could be mentioned. So understanding the roots of anxiety means realizing that at the core, our anxiety is directly proportional to the vulnerability of what we love most. In other words, anxiety is a perpetual problem and a deeply rooted problem because it's tied to our fear of losing the things we have prized above all. We have all taken good things and made them ultimate things. But these things that we have made ultimate cannot and will not ultimately satisfy us. They were not meant to. So anxiety will not be something that can be managed only with quick fixes and tips. Anxiety is a reminder that the thing you have made your ultimate security cannot secure you. So you asked about how to deal with anxiety efficiently, and I would say, as a counselor, that seeing a counselor sooner rather than later is one of the most efficient ways of dealing with anxiety. For instance, if you're in a relationship that's distressed, but not yet in a crisis, now is the time to make an appointment with a counselor to deal with the issues before more damage is done to the relationship. Mm-hmm. Part of my training has been through the Gottman Institute, which is a world-renowned body of marriage research. And they found that couples often wait 6 years after the onset of significant marital problems before seeing a counselor. So at that point, it's much harder, much more time-consuming, and much more painful to work on the issues. In addition to all that, I would say know yourself. Take a good personality test like the Enneagram. It's $12 on the Enneagram Institute website, and it's a rich and nuanced look at how your personality reacts to stress and what health looks like for you, and it helps you understand your own behavior, your strengths, and your stuck points better. I would say that also deal with the moral and existential aspects of who you are. We can often have deep questions that bring up anxiety that have to do with existential things, like what happens when I die? And what about my future? What is life about? What is my purpose on this earth? So understanding those and learning to speak about these things rather than suppressing them, like a lot of us do in this culture, is a really powerful way to get at your deeper roots of anxiety. As you both know, having a supportive community is really vital. Having good friends and family that can support you, professional guidance, and wise teachers who can offer you counsel. These are just a few long-term strategies to help you fight for joy. But do see a counselor or find a safe person who can help you know yourself and your context to better apply right prescriptions.
Oh, I love that use of the word prescriptions.
Oh yeah, we love
that pun.
We love those RX puns.
Wow,
I like that one.
That's great advice because not only does it tackle the short term, what you can do now, but also the long term, the maintenance of managing stress throughout all areas of your life. So let's say that people still can't get away from that I don't have time mentality. Let's say that they don't seek help. How does not managing stress affect other people in your life? Like as a counselor, how have you seen that manifest in clients over the years?
Yeah, great question. First, if you don't mind, I think it might be helpful for us to reframe stress. Anxiety is known as the common cold of mental health. Good anxiety shows you're a caring person. Example that I have from my own life is that when one of my kids is sick, I have a low level of anxiety about their getting better. It's not consuming, but because I care about them, there's a certain degree of fussing that I do over them to get them healthy. So this is good anxiety, and it's really in contrast to debilitating anxiety, which is negative and harmful to yourself and to others. So what I'm getting at here is that there is a spectrum with which to understand anxious responses and causes. One way for you to determine where your anxiety is on the spectrum is to take a situational units of distress scale rating. So this is a rating from 0 to 10. It's called the SUD scale. And this will help you periodically assess how you're doing during the day. 0 is not being stressed at all. 5 is that you are feeling stressed, but it's manageable. And 10 on the scale would be very stressed out and I need to have an intervention. This might also help you become aware of when you're flooded. Flooding, in psychological terms, is also known as diffuse physiological arousal, or DPA. It's described by the Gottmans as a general alarm response that means danger for the person experiencing it. When you're flooded, your brain fills with neurotransmitters like cortisol, and it takes 20 minutes for those chemicals to move from your brain and out through your body. You'll notice you're flooded when your heart rate goes above 100, or if you're athletic, it goes above 80. And you need to be able to take a 20-minute break when your mind is flooded and when your body's flooded, and to move away from conflict, because if you don't, it's going to sabotage your being listened to by others. What's more, the Gottmans found that the effects on men and women are different with flooding, but they're important to understand. Flooding often accompanies feelings of being overwhelmed by the way one's partner raises issues and conflict. It leads people basically to want to flee or to aggress. The Gottmans found that men are more likely than women to rehearse negative thoughts that may prolong flooding and vigilance, and this can lead to distancing and stonewalling and isolation, essentially not being heard and feeling alone in your stress and conflict. The Gottmans also found that flooding and relational conflict leads to a decreased ability to take in information, an increase in defensiveness, a reduction in the ability to be creative in problem solving, and a reduction in the ability to listen and empathize. So I want you to picture the external stress in your life, kind of like a storm that's beating down on you and on your relationship. Do you want to be in the kind of relationship that protects one another against the storm? Or do you want to be in a relationship where you add to the turbulence of one another's lives? Research from Neil Jacobson in marital counseling relapse showed that the greatest predictor of relapse was how the couple handles external stress. Or to say this positively, research shows that couples who buffer their relationship from external stresses are able to maintain the positive changes in their relationship over time. There are so many stresses that we all face in this world, and many people, including couples, feel lonely in their experiences of stress.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like if you're in that metaphorical storm, if you hand your partner an umbrella and say, oh, come under, I'll protect you, it'll help a little bit because you're together and you're not so isolated. So I love that point.
Exactly.
So what would you say are some of the best time-saving tips for managing stress?
There are a lot of things I could say here, but let me just give you a handful. I would say restructure your time. Just like when you don't have enough money, but you need to pay for bills, you start cutting out the excess in your budget. Start cutting out the excess in your life that is preventing you from taking care of yourself, from taking care of your family and your partner. You may find the things you had to have in your schedule are not as necessary as you first thought. You may also find that there are non-negotiables, so make compromises. Identify one or two things that are core needs, that are inflexible areas that you have, and then make everything else something you can be flexible about. You also say, live in the moment. When we live in the past or future, we live out of sync with what we have and what we can enjoy. And then we become anxious because we have made a good thing an ultimate thing and linked our happiness to that one thing. So look for things that you can be grateful for in the present, rather than things to regret from the past or worry about in the future. For every one negative thought about yourself or someone else, think or say 5 positive things about yourself or someone else. The Gottmans and other researchers have found that we often scan the environment for what is wrong. So I would say scan the environment for what is right. In fact, the research by the Gottmans show that when people are in a negative state, they not only don't see the positive interactions from their partner, but they interpret neutral actions as negative. We have to retrain our brains to find the positive. Also, create boundaries where you need them. If you're taking too much responsibility for others or for other people's feelings, note this and actively choose to carry your own load. You cannot change other people. You only have control over your own choices and feelings. Try to carve out time each day to cultivate awe and wonder for things greater than you. This one is really huge. Nature is a wonderful place to learn that you are small, and there's a creator who is sovereign. Try to keep things in perspective. Anxiety tends to make everything seem big, and our life and problems become weightier than we can bear. When you are more anxious, your thoughts become fixed on you and your anxiety. So try to practice self-forgetfulness and give to others, especially those who have less than you. And you'll become happy through getting things ordered in your perspective. Show kindness to other people. It is more happy for you to give to someone else than for you to receive. Show empathy for someone else and walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak, and you will be amazed at the joy that can come from putting aside yourself and turning towards someone else. Try to plan a time during the day that you're going to disconnect from technology and things that add to your to-do list. Keep that to-do list short every day. I would also say pay attention to your body. To operate well, it needs sleep, good food, and exercise. Your body will be able to handle your daily load better when it's operating at its best. But try to remember, too, that dealing with the shoots or the symptoms of anxiety only will never take away the anxiety root. Many people try to put on tips and tricks, and they can be good and helpful for a time. But to manage stress, you have to understand the roots of the anxiety and the shoots.
Wow, this is great. And what I really like about them is they're actually practical things that we can put in. But what it sounds like when you're talking about all this is the cure, so to speak, of anxiety in relationships really is based on communication. Is that right?
I would say that communication is a huge part of it. Dealing with your anxiety and having someone else with you in it is powerful. And to a certain degree, we will all have anxiety in our life because there's always things that we love and hold on to and are afraid that we're going to lose at its core. But when you're with other people and when you're spiritually anchored, I think that you have a refuge against the storms of this world.
Wow. So also it looks like you're talking about the non-negotiables. So it sounds more like a structured flexibility. So there's some structure, but you have some flexibility in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So looking at that, getting this into a habit to create these kind of rituals that you're talking about, what would you recommend as some practical daily rituals that you have found through your practice to be most effective?
Great question. One thing that I've found personally effective is dealing with my self-talk. When you wake up in the morning, your mind is talking to you constantly throughout the day. You are always taking in messages and hearing messages and making meaning from those messages. And we need to learn to talk back. I'll give you an example. The other day, my 5-year-old son came up to me and said, "Mommy, fear is talking to me." And he looked at me with these big eyes and just broke my heart with his sweetness. And he kept cataloging what the fear was saying to him. We talked through it about talking back to fear. What is fear saying to you? What do you believe about what the fear is saying to you? And replacing that message with something that you believe that is different. Another thing that's helped is really getting into nature, taking long walks, listening to music. Those are all proven ways of dealing with anxiety and things that I've found to be really helpful. I love to paint and get creative. People like to work with their hands, and these are things that help them manage their anxiety also in their body. Talking to my best friend who empathizes with me is one of the most powerful things to do. Again, that goes back to that idea of communication and being a buffer for one another in the storm. So these patterns of thought and activity help me manage my own load. Anxiety does come to us as an emotion typically and not a decision, but I would say that you do have a decision with how to deal with it. I found it helpful to first identify anxiety in the body where you're feeling tense, to name it. And I have to say that some people have trouble here. Many of us were not taught to identify our feelings. We were taught to suppress our feelings. We were taught not to have feelings. And so figuring out what you feel in the moment can sometimes be complicated. I would recommend finding a feeling list online. There are plenty of them. And learning to tie your feeling to your bodily experiencing. One thing that might be helpful here is also the idea of focusing. If you look on the website for focusing, it's a way of, again, identifying your feelings in the moment and becoming really aware of what your body is saying. One other thing that I would say is that writing or speaking to someone about the messages that you hear about anxiety, kind of like what I described with my son, what message are you taking in when you're anxious? And finding out what the root of your fear is part of dealing with the beliefs that you have that are part of the cause of anxiety's presence. If it's okay, I'd like to give you another example of dealing with anxiety in the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
So personally, I don't feel my anxiety first through my feelings. It often comes to my awareness as a bodily experience. Usually it's an upset stomach. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realize how stressed out I am. In those moments, I focus on my self-talk and I analyze what part of the message I'm believing that is true and what part of the message is a distortion. And this whole process actually just takes a few minutes once you've gotten good at it. For instance, this happened to me the other night. I was listening to a lecture at my church and the time for question and answer came, and I am a lover of public speaking. I don't have any anxiety about doing the speaking, but as the microphone was being passed around the group, I suddenly became extremely anxious. My heart started racing and I had trouble breathing deeply because I had unconsciously begun to restrict my breathing. And it felt like my 3-year-old was sitting on my chest. But in that moment, I became aware that I was anxious, and I allowed myself to feel it. I started taking deep breaths that at first I had to force out, and I realized, with some insight, that I always get this anxious during a Q&A in a big crowd. I also realized that growing up in school, I would feel nervous to speak up in class from fear of sounding dumb. This is a side note, but did you know that one of the things that God most frequently commands in Scripture is do not be afraid? And most often the reason cited to not fear is because God himself is with you. So for me, as a Christian, the promise that God is with me is a truth I can choose to believe. Our thoughts affect how we feel, and the beliefs that we have become our experiential reality. God is with me experientially, not just ideologically. So the power of being with God in the moment is more precious and desirable to me than any other desire. To be approved of or to be seen as smart takes second place. So this strikes a serious blow to my need for man's approval. I want to say this whole process took me less than 5 minutes, but that's because I've done the work on the roots of the issue in this particular case, and I know now how to deal with the symptoms, those shoots that come. My hope and prayer is that everyone listening would come to know the love of God for them and the power to trade lesser joys for the greatest joy. To learn to give all your anxiety to God because he says that he cares for you.
It's beautifully said. And for everyone listening, you don't know Kamala personally, but she is one of the most insightful, spiritually grounded, amazing people that I have met since I moved to Pennsylvania. And if you have the opportunity to work with her, I would highly recommend it. And we're going to be putting some of her information in the show notes, so make sure that you check that out. Thank you so much for all of your insight. I mean, it's just beautifully said, and I couldn't agree more.
Dr. Palmer, you gave a lot of amazing advice here. If people do want to reach out and get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Certainly. You can find me on Psychology Today. I am there, and my phone number and email is there as well if you'd like to contact me for counseling. I hope this was helpful, and I'm just so thankful that both of you have asked me to be on it. I'm honored by your commendations, and it's a joy to know you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for The Fit Pharmacist, providing your RX for success to overcome anxiety.